Welcome, everybody, to her transformation table. My name is Coach Mary Medley. I coach women from 25 to 45 on imposter syndrome, self love, self doubt, and self confidence, as well as burnout. And today's guest is Lisa, and she's going to be talking to us about burnout. In case you're wondering who she is, Lisa D is a mom of two, a wife, a career and mindset coach. She has worked as a certified guidance counselor doing personal and career counseling in various settings with various populations for over 10 years. She is today's special guest on our weekly live here, her transformation table. Our topic is all about burnout. So, welcome, Lisa D. How are
Thank
you?
you, Mary. I'm doing really well yourself.
I'm fine, thank you. I'm sure I didn't do proper justice, so please feel free to introduce yourself.
I think you did a great job. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for that warm welcome. I'm really excited to be here because burnout is a topic I'm passionate about, which might sound odd because it's not really a positive thing, but I think it's something we need to be talking about more and creating awareness around. So I'm glad I get to do that with you today. So thank you.
You're so very
Uh,
welcome.
Yeah, so I guess to tell you a bit more about me, you did a great job. I guess all I could really add is that yeah, so I have a background in mental health. So I did do my BA and MA in counseling psychology from McGill University, and I worked in the field as a career or personal counselor for over 10 years before I transitioned into coaching. So today I work exclusively as a career and mindset coach, and I help people, pardon, in that capacity. So over the course of my 10 years as a counselor, however, I did burn out twice. So I am all too familiar with with burnout personally. And I also have had the privilege to work with people when I was in private practice who were about mid-career and also, navigating some career adjustments, changes, transitions, who are experiencing burnout. So it's also familiar to me professionally. And in fact, I wanted to add too that burnout was the catalyst to me making my own career transition. So it's actually why I'm here talking with you today, Mary. So I had to change something in how I was living and working, and I guess you could say burnout was the wake up call for me, and it's why I'm now a coach.
Well, interestingly enough, it's the same thing for me. I also
Hmm.
burnt out, and for I think I took it harder than I probably should have. So I'm excited to have someone who has not only gone through it twice, but someone who understands the psychology behind it. So I
Yeah.
guess my first question is, what is burnout? What is the definition of burnout?
Right. So the definition of burnout is generally that it's a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that results from prolonged and chronic stress over time. So that's generally the definition you'll see everywhere about what burnout is.
And the way you're saying stress over time, does it mean that it tends to creep up on you?
Yes, I love that you just asked that question. Yeah, so if it's okay, I'll get into like what are the symptoms of burnout? What does it look like? And that was the first thing I wanted to highlight in talking about that. By the way, if you see me glancing down, it's because I'm looking at notes. It keeps me on track,
Go ahead.
or else I'm a bit of a talker. So there you go. Yeah, so one of the things that you just mentioned that's really important is that burnout tends to be a very slow and insidious process. And I think we often think of like I either have burnout or I don't. I'm either burned out or I'm not, and it doesn't quite work that way. It's a slow process that kind of snowballs over time. So I thought I would talk about the symptoms kind of in stages to see the
Mhm.
evolution of what it could look like, and I think that'll allow those who are listening in to see like am I stressed or am I burnt out? Am I on the road to burnout? And I think that's important because depending on where you are on the spectrum will kind of inform, what to do. Can you prevent getting to the point of hitting a wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would say that the beginning stages of burnout tend to look like feeling constantly overwhelmed. You feel emotionally drained, and you feel like you can't keep up with the constant demands on you. And I think it's important to like pinpoint that it's not just work. It could be in life as well, in other areas of your life. So there's this kind of consistent feeling of overwhelm everywhere. And as it persists, right? So if this is happening some days, that's pretty normal. We all get overwhelmed sometimes. We all feel stress sometimes. We all feel anxiety sometimes. Those are normal, experiences. But it's as they become more frequent and it becomes most days, then we could be looking at the beginning of, the road to burnout. So as it persists, you might go from feeling overwhelmed, drained, and just feeling like you can't keep up with the demands of your day to day. And then it could turn into loss of interest and motivation in the things you once enjoyed, reduced productivity at work or at home, difficulty concentrating, and feeling increasingly drained and tired. And then, towards the extreme of the spectrum could enter in the feelings of hopelessness, cynicism, resentment, even anger, frustration, and like a general dissatisfaction with life. So I think what's really important to nuance here, and I think it'd be hard to nuance between what is stress and what is burnout. And I like to see it as stress is like feels like there's just too much going on. Like you have a lot to deal with, but it's kind of temporary and you'll get past it. Whereas burnout is kind of this feeling like I'm depleted, I don't have anything left to give. So it's like a sense of not enoughness. So I think we all go through periods of stress where we think, okay, there's a lot of demands on me right now, and I got to cope and I got to step it up, and this is hard. But burnout is more like, oh, there's so much on me and I don't have anything left to give. So,
I agree.
yeah,
I agree with that. I think for me, the turning point, if I could call it that, was being unable to get out of bed, no matter how many alarm clocks I set up, and I set up so
yeah,
many. And even if I did get to work early or on time, I felt like I didn't know what to do, like where to begin, where to organize my brain. I just felt stuck and I couldn't
yes,
unstick myself. And I didn't realize it was called burnout. I just thought if I go on vacation, maybe something will happen. But even coming back from vacation, I think was even worse. It was a very strange experience when you don't know what's happening. So I guess,
absolutely.
yeah, my next question would be, if you have a business or you're in a nature of work where you cannot escape overworking, for example, nursing, how can you
Mm.
avoid burnout?
So I thought this is a really interesting question, and the reason is because I feel like burnout is very much closely related to boundaries. If the notion of boundaries or boundary setting is new to you, well, it's basically, learning to say no and not taking on too much and knowing where your limits are so you can protect your energy. And so if you're in a work environment where, the question you're asking is if you cannot escape overworking. Listen, work isn't a prison, right? Like work is not a prison. So if
Yeah.
you are in an environment where you are not allowed to set healthy work boundaries to protect your energy and your well-being, I would argue that you are in a toxic and psychologically unsafe work environment. So I guess, if I come back to your question, if we think about nurses, for example, they are in a very difficult situation where they are being able to, overextend themselves and work, hours on end, and sometimes being forced to come in. And so I would say that in a job like that, that's a certain circumstance where they're making it rather impossible to set healthy work boundaries without putting your job at risk. And so I would argue that that's not a safe work environment. And I think when you find yourself in a situation like that, unfortunately, I think you have a really hard decision to make. And that decision is, do I continue to contend and cope with this? Or do I make the decision to leave? And I think this is why we're seeing, I don't know where you are, Mary, but I know here we're seeing a max exodus of nurses in health, because they're just being pushed. Their back is against the wall, and they have to choose between, their own survival and wellness and caring for others. And that is a terrible, terrible place to be in. So I guess to come back to the question, like, if you cannot escape overworking, I think the belief there is that you're helpless, that you're powerless over your situation, and I don't think you are at all. You always have a choice. It just could be a very, very difficult one, and I encourage anybody in that position to really stop and think about your situation, and whether if it's something you want to continue to contend with. Because if it is something you choose to contend with, I think in an environment like that, it's not a question of if you're going to burn out, but when.
Yeah, so I guess if you feel like you might have to quit your job, it's because you might have to quit your job. There's no other way out.
Right. I mean, there's things you can do to cope, but and I'm gonna come back to this later, because I think nursing is a bit of an extreme example, but there's like
Yeah.
lots of shades of gray, where we may be overworked, but we do have a role to play in that as well. And there's, we have more control than we sometimes realize or think. But yeah, I think there are situations where you really have to look at it and say, this is what is expected of me. Am I okay with this? And make a very conscious choice whether to stay or leave.
What would you say are the mental health effects of burnout?
Yeah, so I think we touched on that a little bit with the symptoms, but to go a little bit more depth, I think when you're at the extreme end of burnout, you can tend to feel helpless and hopeless, which is, I guess, speaks to that phrasing of, like, you feel like you can't do anything, you're stuck, and you're forced. So there's a sense of feeling hopeless, helpless, trapped, stuck. You may even feel alone, and you feel like you're failing. And I think some behavioral cues to that, maybe I didn't mention earlier, was that you start to isolate from others. You may start to withdraw from your responsibilities, and you may even start adopting unhealthy coping mechanisms. So if you find yourself, using food, drugs, alcohol, gambling, shopping, and so on as a way to cope, and kind of, try to, yeah, just essentially cope with the situation. This can all very much, these are all signs that your mental health is being affected.
What about depression? I mean, I know with all these things, once they combine, but is depression something that's definitely on the road?
We can't say definitely. I think, burnout is very multifaceted, and I'll talk a bit about that later. But can you experience depression if you're burnt out? Yes. Can you experience depression, not experience depression when you're burnt out? Yes. And, basically they can coexist, and you can experience burnout without depression. So, is depression always a part of burnout? Not necessarily. It really depends on where you are on the spectrum, what is contributing to the experience of burnout. And I think there's a lot more to consider. So I think it's, we have to be careful to I think it can often lead to experiencing a sense of burnout, because burnout is very much related to our perceived sense of control. So if you feel like you're out of control and you don't have, a say on what's going on around you, that will fuel that, those feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. And those are also synonymous to depression, right? So, but it doesn't mean you are depressed. So this is why, if you're experiencing burnout or even, depression, or you don't know what's what, it's really important that you consult with a certified mental health professional that could really help you diagnose your unique situation.
So, what is the recovery process for burnout?
Hmm. So I think in that same vein, there's no one answer. It depends. It really depends. The road to recovery will look really different from one person to another, not just based on their unique situation in terms of like the whole mental health piece, but even other circumstances. For if I speak to my own story, for me, I don't know about you, Mary, but like I took time off. That was a possibility for me. I took time off to kind of recover and reflect and, find out what happened and make the changes I needed. But I know not everybody has that opportunity, and can necessarily allow themselves to do that. So, and also it really depends on what is contributing to burnout. And so I guess I'm gonna kind of elaborate on this, because I think we often think of burnout as the cause being work, and it may be and it may not be. And here's what I mean. Okay. Our personality traits play a role in burnout. So I know, like, many of the definitions we read and many of the articles talk about like burnout being professionally related, like it's a work problem, it's the work's fault. So it's the result of being overworked and too much pressure and just, not enough support, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, that can very well be an important contributor to experiencing burnout. And the other part is us. And what I mean by that, and I'll speak from my personal experience. So the personality traits that tend to exacerbate or contribute to experience of burnout are things like being a perfectionist. Okay. So if you're a perfectionist, nothing is ever good enough. So you are never done. So you're always going to like work and work and work to try and make things better. If you are a people pleaser, you will struggle to say no and set boundaries. And therefore you're always going to be giving more than you have, hence that not enoughness, right? If you
Yeah.
are a overachiever, excellence is important to you. You want to do more and better and keep going and keep climbing, and you don't know how to afford yourself the pace, compassion, and pause. And so those are a couple examples. I know these are very much, I could very much speak to these at a very personal level,
Yeah.
because I used to struggle to set boundaries. And what that looks like is, if you're in a work environment that is overworking you to begin with, and you are worried about saying no because of what it will look like, and you are worried about asking for help because you'd rather do it yourself, or you're afraid of that, what that would look like. If you're a perfectionist and you're always striving for more, better, bigger, and it's never done, and it's like a ticking burnout bomb waiting to blow up. It's both. So you have an environment that is not conducive to wellness, that is, not supportive, that is lacks resources, that is overworking you, whose demands are unrealistic. Add to that you are somebody who wants to be perceived well, that you're an overachiever, that you want to do things perfectly, and you have a recipe for disaster. On the other hand, if I take it to the other extreme, if you are somebody who possesses all these traits and you're in a perfectly healthy work environment, there's still a risk for burnout. Why? For the very same reasons. You may not be being pushed to overwork, or the demands not, maybe there are demands on you, but if you don't know how to say stop, and if you don't know how to say I need help, if you don't know how to say this is too much, the person on the other side doesn't know you're struggling. Okay. So if that's the case, they can't help you. And that's not a them problem, that's a you problem, because you have to be articulating that. You have to give them the opportunity to support you. And so I know that was a big lesson for me. And the reason I learned that was because burnout followed me.
Mm.
Burnout followed me everywhere I went, toxic work environments or not. And at some point, you have to say, what is the common denominator? And that was me. And so, so I mentioned, I talk about overachieving, people pleasing, perfectionism. The other factors, personality trait wise, are outlook on life. If you're generally have a negative outlook, if you are, somebody who complains or always finds the problem in a situation, or who, tends to point fingers at people and things and ideas that if only this were different, I'd be fine. You're going to drain your own energy. You're going to drain your energy and everybody around you. And that's exacerbating um, exacerbating that energy leak. As the same thing for the need for control. If you can't delegate tasks and ask for help, you are going to perpetuate that lack of energy. So again, like, I'm not saying this from a place of judgment. I am totally guilty of all of these. I think the reason why I'm bringing this up is that I think we have this perception that burnout is a work problem, and it very well may be. And
Mhm.
we also have a role to play, because if we are being overworked, it is our job to say, I am being overworked. It is our job to say, I need help. And if you can't do that, that's part you. If you don't feel safe to do that because of any repercussions it might have from a professional standpoint, that's a them problem. And then it leaves us in a position of, what are the decisions I'm going to make to either contend with the situation? So the choice is always the same. Do I contend? Is there something more I can do? What do I need? Have I asked for what I need? And if so, if the situation is still the same, then your decision, like in the nursing example, is, do I stay and contend and cope? Or do I make the decision to go where I need to go to be well and thrive? Yeah, so I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Mary. I know you've been there.
No, I think that I love the way you've put it. It is definitely not just a work related issue. I think you can be burnt out even being a working mom or a stay at home mom.
Absolutely.
If you're not getting help, if you're not getting the right stimulation, if you're trying to do everything, it is definitely a perfectionist issue. And
Mm.
you were saying that, and I was just writing down and noting because that is me on so many levels. Whether or not it's a toxic environment, I am an overworker naturally and a perfectionist. So yeah, I think I can definitely see how I also got burnt out. But I
Yeah.
love it. I love that you say personality traits plus environment plus personal communication or lack thereof, and your outlook on life. Um,
Yeah.
it's very powerful. So, what is
Thank
your
you.
personal experience on this topic?
Yeah, so I guess I touched on that. I kind of woven my story there. Yeah, so my personal experience was that. Like, I think when I realized, so a bit like you were sharing at the beginning, the first time I burnt out, it was mostly, I just mostly experienced shame, guilt, embarrassment, denial even. I think I didn't want to admit to myself where I was. I couldn't believe I was there, and I struggled for a long time to accept it. And I would tell you that the first time I burnt out, I didn't heal. I was trying to, I think I was, honestly, looking back, I think I was still in denial. And I took time off, but it wasn't time off well spent. I got help, but it wasn't, I wasn't coping. I was really in the depths of despair and embarrassment. And it was really the second burnout when I realized, okay, there's something going on here.
Yeah.
And I got to stop feeling bad for myself and I need to do something about it. And the second time I realized I burned out, I can share a short story actually. My daughter was my wake up call. So I had my first child, Olivia, and you know, I had just been doing the thing, the working mom thing. You go to work, you do the job, you come home. And the truth of the matter is, my job at that time was extremely demanding. Not just like the amount of work, but the type of work I was doing. And so I was coming back home emotionally, psychologically drained, physically drained, and depleted. And I just honestly wasn't showing up as the mother I wanted to be. And my daughter called me out on it. My daughter called me out on it one Saturday morning. I got up and, like you were sharing, Mary, the snooze button, couldn't get
Yeah.
out of bed. And it was Saturday morning and I couldn't get out of bed. And I got up, because I had to take care of my daughter. My husband was around, he was helping. And I just said, listen, I got to go back to bed. And it wasn't go back to bed because I'm tired, like sleep tired. It was tired because I don't want to participate in life. I am drained. And my daughter walked in. She was 2.5 at the time. And she walked by my room to get something in hers. And she said to me, "Not again, mom."
Wow.
And that's when all I heard in that moment was, again.
Yeah.
How often have I been doing this, right? This kind of
Yeah.
escaping and isolating myself and not participating. And I realized that before Olivia, this was very much normal for me. I'd go to work, have a hard day, come home, go to bed, start over, but didn't have any other responsibilities. I just had me. And now I had her. And when she said that, I immediately thought to myself, like I said, how often have I been doing this? And is this what I want to be showing her? Is this what I want to teach her about what it is to live and work? I mean, we have kids, and all we ever want for our kids is for them to be happy.
Yeah.
And here I am. If I want her to be happy, we all know kids do what we do, not what we say.
Yeah.
Right? And so if
Yeah.
I wanted my daughter to be happy, I was going to have to show her how. And my why is my kids. Everything I do is they're important to me. And I was like, I need to stop putting everybody else in mental health. But I was always helping everybody else, but I wasn't helping myself, and I wasn't helping, the people that mattered most to me. I wasn't showing up in the way that I wanted to show up in her life. And that was the beginning of this chapter, because
Yeah.
the next day I went to my doctor and I asked for help, and I started a journey. And I refused to allow myself to feel any guilt, shame, or embarrassment, because nobody else is living my life but me. And I chose to no longer care about what anybody would think about my choices. And I just made the decision to do what I had to do to be well for me and my family. And that sent me on this wild journey of my own career questioning and search, and here we are today.
It's funny you mentioned your daughter because for me it was the same thing. I had my second child in 2019, and I had medical issues even after the maternity period. And my
Okay.
doctor said these issues are more mental. Like, it seems you need to rest. Maybe you shouldn't go back to work. Maybe you should extend your maternity. And for me, that was unheard of. I was the workhorse at work. I wasn't the one that didn't show up to work. I
Right.
think my last job, 8 years, I took sick leave twice, and that was because I was really unwell. And the first one
Right.
was I had an eye problem and I lost my vision while working on my computer,
Wow.
if you could believe it. And I took, was it a week or two off under doctor's orders. And the second time was actually while I was pregnant with my second one. So I never took a sick off, and even a vacation was not helping me. I was just
Right.
completely finished and exhausted. And I looked at my child just after having my baby, and I could not imagine that I was going to go back to work, continue feeling the way I was feeling, and not even being able to enjoy my child. So I completely get what you're saying, because after the maternity period was over and I wasn't healed well enough, my doctor said, You can go back, not yet, extend." And I just knew, no,
Mhm.
actually, I'm not going to extend. I'm just going to stop. So that's what I
Good for
did. And
you.
it did launch me also on this self search journey, because you have so many fears and worries. Was that the right decision? Should I have just extended my maternity instead of resigning? Should I go back to work? And it was such a wild journey. And what saved me was that I found coaching, and it's the best thing ever. So I guess in a way,
Mhm.
burnout for me was a blessing in disguise.
I am right
um,
there with you. Yes. And it's also how I discovered coaching. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. So,
I have to say,
so
Mary, sorry, I love what you just shared because I think what it touches on is I think sometimes, um, we just keep going, because our mind is in denial. And I think what you just shared is that at one point our body stops us.
yes, oh
And
yes,
that's what was happening to you. And I think that's something that we haven't touched on, we haven't talked about, which is like the somatic system, the somatic symptoms, right? The
yeah,
physical
yeah,
symptoms that sometimes um, appear as a result of the burnout. And I think when we can't stop ourselves up here, our body has a way of stopping us for us. And it really is for us. I just wish
yeah.
I wish more of us didn't have to wait to get to that point to stop. But yeah, sometimes it does take that.
It's true, but you never know until it happens. Like for me, it was, looking back is when I realized, oh, this was happening for quite some time. It
Mm,
wasn't even me having my baby. It was like having the baby was a culmination of my body is already trying to escape me. And then I get pregnant
oh
with
my
all the stresses of pregnancy. So it's interesting. The getting out of bed for me was the weirdest thing. I kept
God.
thinking about when I first got that job and how excited I was. I remember going to work almost every day, possibly 20 minutes early, first one in, last one out. And now I could hardly, even if I got up on time, I never made it to work on time.
I can
Somehow
relate.
every every
Hmm.
part of me was stopping itself from getting to work. And then I'd get to work. I've always been a list person. I'm constantly listing things, what to do, and I would stare at the page. I think
Yes.
when I lost my eyesight, it was my body saying, no, you need to take a break. But I didn't get the message. You really feel stuck. You feel like you can't move on to the next task, to the next step, to the
Yeah.
next planning. And it's a bit scary because you don't understand what's going on. And you were in clinical psychology. So I think in that respect, you were
Counseling.
lucky.
Yeah, counseling psychology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was working in construction. So
Right.
there's nobody
Right.
to tell you, oh, you're burnt out. You need to do this or that. I had absolutely no direction. I
That's
was
such a great
asking
point. Yeah.
I was asking
Go ahead.
myself, what's wrong with me? And other people are asking me, what's wrong with me? You're not
That's such a
yourself.
great point. Yeah, and I want to add to that because even when I burnt out the first time, I didn't know it was a nurse that took me aside, as somebody who worked with me and took me aside and said, "Come here, I need to talk to you." And I was like, "Okay." And she's like, "You need to call your doctor." And I was like, "Why?" Completely. When I say needs now, she's like, "Because you're not functioning, you're not well." And I'm like, okay, like I had been crying that day, and she's like, "You're not well." And I'm like, no, I mean, I'll be fine. It's but like, Lisa, call your doctor, here's what you're gonna say. And then when I started listening to her and really internalizing what she was saying, I was like, I felt a sense of relief, and I'm like, "Ooh, wait, what's that?" And I listened, and that's when I saw my doctor, and she put me off. And it's because of that that the second time, what you're describing, Mary, what it looked like for me was,
Yeah.
I remember going into work and reading my emails, and I could not understand what was written in my emails. I was reading
Yes.
it and I'm like, okay, wait, start over, start over. And I would reread my email like, okay, this one, I don't know why I'm not understanding. Let me go on to the next one. And I would read my next email. I'm like, why aren't I understanding anything? And then I was like, okay, well, let me put this aside. I'll try a different task. And then I had to see in that time a student. And I'm like, I can't see a student. I don't have the energy to see a student. So no, I'm not going to do that. And then so I was doing this, and I was like, what is happening? And that's when it hit me that I'm like, uh-oh, because I
Yeah.
had been there before and now I
Yeah.
had the experience and knowledge. But you're right. But even then, as an early mental health professional, I was not able to see it in myself
Yeah.
because we are not objective to ourselves, right? We
That is
don't
true.
want to say, I hit a wall,
Yeah.
especially if you're an overachiever, especially if you are. So anyway, I thought I would bounce off that because I think what you just shared was really powerful, and a lot of people might see that in their day to day in those examples that we just gave. Yeah.
Well, because for me, like I said, I was working in construction. I had no idea that I could get help, that it was something that I needed someone to show me. And I'm sure it's the same for many people in industries where they don't even maybe run into a coach. They're not aware that they could get a coach. So
Right.
this brings me to your practice. Tell us about it, and if anyone out there maybe watching on YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook wants to reach out to you because they've realized, oh yeah, I'm suffering from that, and I think Lisa could help me. Tell us about your practice, Life by
Yeah,
Design.
so it was born of my experience and what I noticed on my own journey to trying to achieve career clarity and direction. So, if I was going to make a change, what change would I make? Um, and the truth of the matter is, I had seen therapists and I had seen career counselors, and I was still struggling to get the clarity and direction I need. And that's when I realized that there was something more going on. And it was like you, was I met a career coach, and I knew that it was not a career coach. She was a therapist slash coach. And I immediately understood that she wasn't doing therapy with me because I knew, I knew what that looked like. And so I was like, what is this? And that kind of cued me into coaching. And that was the missing piece. And so now what I do is I essentially provide the service I wish I had. So I help people who feel unfulfilled professionally transform their career and life in such a way that they can create sustainable happiness. So I help people identify what needs to change in their career and map out the career trajectory that they need, that aligns with who they are and what's important to them, and find work that aligns with that and create a life that fits with that. Because I often think we separate the two, and fulfillment is really achieved when what you do fits into your life and not the other way around. We are trained to do work and live on the side when we have a little bit of spare time and energy, and that's not the solution for fulfillment. So I basically use my experience to create my approach and to work with people who are ready to make the change, who are are saying, okay, no, something needs to change, and I need to find what I need to do to feel happy in my work and feel happy in my life. So that's what I get to do today.
I think that's amazing. So maybe you could share your website, your link, your page.
Sure, sure. Would you like me to put it in the comments? Well, I don't know if I could
Y-
do that, or I just say it. I could tell you
Maybe just say it.
verbally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can find me on LinkedIn at Lisa_D_Life by Design. You can find me on Facebook as well under I think you can use the at Lisa D Life by Design, and my website, www.lisadlifebydesign. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I do offer free resources. So if you're hearing some of this and you're thinking that, I want to make a very clear distinction here. If you're struggling with burnout, I encourage you to speak to a mental health professional, and I encourage you to speak to your doctor. If you need support in making a career change, that's where I come in, right? So there's
Yeah.
two aspects here. There's an aspect of healing and there's an aspect of change. So I'm in the change part. If you want to look at what that looks like, what my process looks like, I actually offer free training. So you can go, it's not up on my website yet, but you'll find it on my social media. And it's just basically what's going on and what my approach looks like. And there's also, and why you're stuck. Why you're stuck is the key piece, because I didn't realize why I was stuck. And the truth is, you'll understand this, Mary, it's more of a mindset issue than is
Yeah.
it a clarity issue. And we
Yeah.
often think, if I could just figure out what else to do, then I'd be fine. But
Yeah.
you can't figure out what else to do because you're preventing yourself from seeing viable options.
Yeah.
So there's some work there that needs to be done, hence the mindset piece. And the other thing is I do offer free resource. It's my free career clarity guide. So you can use that, and that should help you at least make some headway in terms of what needs to happen.
If you're
So
watching this as a replay, all the links are going to be in the description, and you can be able to reach out to Lisa and Life by Design. So,
thanks, Mary.
Lisa, this has been so amazing. Uh, my last question to you is, if we forget everything that you have said, what is the one piece of advice you want us to carry from this?
There's a way out. You have control.
Mhm.
Don't accept this as your status quo. It doesn't have to be. And if you believe that that's all that is possible, you will. That's what you'll create. But I'm here to tell you that it's not. Don't accept this for yourself. You deserve more and you can achieve more.
Don't accept this as your status quo. You can achieve more.
Right? There's a
Well,
way out.
there's a way
There's a way
out.
out.
Thank you so much, Lisa. This has
Thank
been
you, Mary.
wonderful. Thank you. Despite a bit of sound issues here and there, I think that we've really had a wonderful topic and a wonderful discussion. If anybody wants to reach out to Lisa, once again, check out in the description. She's also on Instagram, so make sure you check out Lisa D Life by Design on Instagram. Uh, Smash that subscribe button, like button, check out her free resources, and do the same for me as well. Coach Mary Medley on Facebook. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm going to share all the links in the description. Lisa, thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thank you,
And
Mary. Thanks for having me. This was great.
you're so very welcome. So, next week we will be having Eliana Barosco. I hope that you'll see you again Thursday, 19, same time, 2 p.m. EST and 10 p.m. East Africa time. So until next week, see you.